Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. In my last video, I said that I wanted to do a Rosetta Stone review. So this time around, I decided to broaden the topic and do tips and techniques that I've been utilizing to self-study, and then also do the Rosetta Stone review and a little bit of a comparison to Duolingo. I'm currently self-studying Korean. I took lessons for 3 semesters, so that's about basically a year and a half. But a lot of the tips and techniques that I have today you can utilize no matter what language you're learning. I have some specific resources for people who want to learn Korean. I thought that since I had a little bit of insight from classes that I would be able to share something you haven't seen before in other videos about self-study. So if this is of any interest of you, if you're thinking about learning a new language, if you're thinking about learning Korean, stick around, let's get to the video. If you're here for the Rosetta Stone review, I'll leave timestamps in the description box so you could go straight to that. But first, I thought that I should start with resources that I used in class while studying Korean. Got a big stack here. These are all of the books that I used when I was studying Korean in school. These books are made by Sogang University, which is a private school based in Seoul. They've been extremely helpful to learning the basics of Korean. I'll leave the link to purchase them in the description box. So these books normally come in pairs. So for class 1, you'll have workbook 1A, and then you'll have student book 1A. Now the difference between the workbook and student book obviously is workbook is more homework type stuff where you could apply the things that you've learned, whereas the student book has a lot of... I did not use the student book ever while I was learning in class. The student book doesn't have like fill in the blanks or anything like that where you'll be applying the work technically. It's more like practice with a partner type work. For example, ask and answer these questions, and then it gives you the dialogue to say to your partner. It has the answers for your friend to say as well. I didn't think it was much help. It's just reading and practicing with the partner, the student book. That's what the student book is. Just to keep it real, like if you don't have to get the student book, I personally wouldn't pay for it. Whereas the workbook is traditionally how you would imagine homework, where you have fill in the blanks, matching, correct the mistakes in a sentence. Much more applied work will be in the workbook. Maybe for the first book, like 1A, since it's your first time buying these books, I would buy the student book so you can gauge yourself whether or not it's helpful for you. But for me, taking classes, I didn't need the student book at all. These books also come with a grammar book, and despite how small it is, I'd say that it was the most helpful resource that we had in the class. The grammar book not only has the vocabulary that you're going to need for each unit in book 1, book 2, and book 3, it also gives you a little intro to the unit as well in the beginning of the book. It basically tells you the rules, the why you're doing what you're doing for this language. And it gives you little examples. It's a lot of like wording, which if you don't have a teacher or a tutor, I would buy the grammar book and the workbook. The grammar book will explain the rules and why you do those rules and what those rules mean. And then the workbook is where you go and apply everything that you learned in this. I love the grammar book. For me, it was one of the most useful resources that we had in class, because even if you have a teacher or a tutor, sometimes you just need a little extra work or a little extra explanation. So continuing right along, leaving off where I was talking about how much I love the grammar book because it also has vocabulary, that leads me to my next section of note card. Now, if you have begun learning a language, and this is for anybody, whether you're learning Korean, French, English, Swahili, Portuguese, it doesn't matter. If you started to learn a language, you know how overwhelming note cards can get. I have some pro tips of what I do to organize my note cards so that I don't get stressed out and just throw them all away. first pro tip I would say is to find note cards that have a little note card holder like this. Yeah, I think it's a genius idea because it's a place where you could just put all of your note cards in one area and not have to worry about it and not have it clutter up your life. So having a note card holder, or if you just buy the stack of note cards and then you buy a separate note card holder, that's fine too. I just so happen to run across these in Target. And what I do, as you see, I have all of these ones sticking up this way. So what I do is I separate my note cards by topic. My first topic is location. Let's see if y'all can see that. Substitute it for whatever language you're learning, but what I do is I put the topic in English and then under I'll put the translation in Korean. After that little section will be all of my note cards dealing with location. The one after that is expression. I have note cards that deal with different everyday expressions that you'll use, all the way back to like body parts, occupations, all of that. That also helps me recall the definitions of the words or the translation of the words in English because I compartmentalized it in my own mind. Bottom line, my pro tip is have a note card holder and separate each of your note cards by section so you know what you're talking about. I personally hate it when I'm flipping through note cards and one note card is talking about a body part and then the next note card is talking about trees, and then the next note card is talking about a job. So what I do is I have them separated by section, and the more I get used to the words and I'm able to recall them in English, after that I'll jumble them together and go through them again, and as I'm going through them I'll re-separate them back into their respective sections before I put them into my note card holder. Next pro tip I would say is when you write note cards, make sure you have a uniform way of writing them. For example, right, so it says wind choke. Do you want, when you're reading your note cards, to flip them this way, or when you're reading your note cards to flip them this way? I made the mistake with just writing my note cards however I wanted to at the time, and now going back and trying to speed around, go through my vocabulary, it gets frustrating because I'll flip it this way and then the word's upside down, and the next card I'll flip it this way and I wrote it the other way. It's like a really tedious, petty complaint I have, but I think that the devil is in the details. So if you have a uniform way of how you write your note cards when it comes to speed around and making sure that you can recall these words quickly. It's petty, but I'm petty. Another pro tip that I have when dealing with note cards is if you're at the stage in your lessons when you're starting to get into conjugations, you can put that on your note card as well, not just the definition. So for some of verbs or adjectives that I have, I'll put in the bottom corner, the bottom left corner, I'll put definition, present tense, past tense, and formal conjugations. So when I'm doing my note cards, I know to answer all of these subtopics in my note card before I flip it over. And then I have all my conjugations, formal speech, polite speech. Put as much information as you can on your note card so that you don't have to have, okay, this is my notebook for dealing with conjugations. These are my note cards dealing with definitions. You can put conjugations on your note card as well and use that to think, okay, now I have to think of the conjugations before I flip it over. Listening and pronunciation. I have notes here to the side of me so that I don't forget anything that I think is important. My tip would be is to watch reality shows or watch interviews, talk shows in the language that you're trying to study. Watch those because dealing with how people interact with each other, which is important when it comes to understanding the culture. Be strategic about the media that you consume when it comes to studying a language, not just consuming it for entertainment. For an example, I'm into K-dramas, but if I'm using a K-drama to study Korean, I'm going to be strategic and I'm going to use one that can be most applied to my life. I wouldn't sit here and watch Rookie Historian, which is set in the Joseon dynasty, to study how to speak Korean, because it's set in the past and they're speaking at a level of formality that I wouldn't use today if I was speaking to somebody. I would choose something that's set in modern times, young adults, something that also is not going to distract me so much where I'm just now consuming it for entertainment purposes and I'm not even focusing on the studying side of it all. Some shows that I think are great starters for using media for learning: Return of Superman. That's a really good show. Actually, I think that's one of the best options you can use. You can watch that one online if you Google it enough for free. Return of Superman is a really good show because it deals with children and their language level is low, like just like us for learning Korean. So it's really easy to understand them in Korean. I was gonna say Show Me the Money for all my K-hip-hop fans out there, but I don't know. Which leads me into my next pro tip. Music. Consuming music to help your listening. Beware. The only reason why I think it's not as helpful as you would think is because music, you're now involving melody, tempo, and enunciation can change just for the sake of making the song flow. This is a music thing, it's not a Korean thing or a specific culture type thing. Sometimes they'll finish a word at the start of the next verse. It could be hard to distinguish when the sentence stops because the next verse might start immediately after they kind of ran those two thoughts together. My tip for if you're gonna use music as a way to learn would be probably hold off on the song first. Choose your favorite song, look up the lyrics, practice enunciate each sentence. Once you get the hang of saying it without the music, without the melody, then you can turn on the song and feel good because now you can sing along to one of your favorite songs. Now, if you're using songs just for translation's sake, forget what I said, go ahead, listen to your favorite song, translate it in your first language, no issues. Another useful resource for learning speaking, listening, interacting with people could be using language partners. I don't have a lot of experience with using some of these apps for language exchange. I've tried HelloTalk, I've tried Tandem. I tried Tandem when I was learning Spanish and I had a good experience with that, but I've heard from other people that they've ran into some creepy people trying to like flirt in the messages. So I would say take that with a grain of salt, be cautious. Just because the person that you decide to do the language exchange with is nice and they help you, that does not automatically make that person your friend or immediately trustworthy. Oh, also don't be the person to go to these language exchange apps trying to flirt. Don't do that. I mean, everybody at the end of the day is going to do what they want to do, but I don't want anybody going there after my video and flirting. Like, I didn't say to do that. I didn't say to do all that. That wasn't me. So now let's get into this Rosetta Stone review. Let me clear this table first because I need the space to talk about this and get my notes. Rosetta Stone, just to be completely clear, my opinions are based off of the 3-month trial that I had for free. I don't think that the free trial had anything that they were like withholding for the full version if you paid for it. We'll start with the pros. My first pro for Rosetta Stone is that they have pronunciation help. There's a section where they'll take a word in a sentence and you have to use your mic to enunciate each syllable in the word until you say the final word together. It's tedious, but it's helpful. Second pro is listening help. There's a section where it's just listening. For the most part, in activities, they write down the sentence that they're saying to you. But in the listening section, there's none of that. You're just listening. And then at the bottom, there's pictures that you have to choose based off what they said. The biggest pro I'd say is that Rosetta Stone has a structure learning, and there's a curriculum behind it, which is the downfall to self-studying, because this isn't your first language, you're not familiar with this, so you don't really know where to begin to build a solid foundation. With self-studying, creating a curriculum can be extremely hard because you're not a teacher. You don't know what's the important basics when beginning to learn a language. So Rosetta Stone provides a curriculum. They were there to help you figure it out. They tell you what's the easiest stuff going into harder stuff. They help you build a solid foundation in learning. Now to the cons. Overall, looking at it, there's more pros than there are cons, but these cons weighed heavy for me. The first con is that they use, I'll call it context clue learning. I'll just give you all an example. The lady will say a vocabulary word. She'll say hat. So she'll say moja, and then there'll be a picture of a hat. Then the next bubble, she'll say, shoes. She'll say shinbag, and then there'll be a picture of shoes right under that. Then the third time she does it, there's no picture, but she'll say a third term that you haven't heard yet, which is, pants. So she'll say paji, and then you have to choose the correct picture that correlates to what she said. There'll be 3 pictures you have to choose from. The first picture will be of a hat. The second picture will be of shoes. And then the third picture will be of a pair of pants. Now, obviously, because the first time she gave you a vocabulary word, she said hat and there was a picture of a hat. The second time she said shoes and there was a picture of shoes. So this third time, it must be the pair of pants because I haven't seen that picture yet. So you click on the pants and yeah, you're right. That worked for me, I guess, because I already knew the vocabulary for shoes, shirt, and pants. But I was thinking long term, like what happens when I get to terms that I don't know yet? Is this really the most effective way for me to learn? I don't really think so. My second con from Rosetta Stone is that there's no page for rules. I think that's ridiculous. Like after each lesson that you do, there should be a page that explains the why. Kind of like in the grammar book where I was talking about, it explains why you do these rules, what these rules mean, stuff like that. There isn't that at all. They just have you do the activities. And I think that that's ridiculous. There should be that. Rosetta Stone, why don't you have that? Why? Like I don't understand why they wouldn't have that. And the reason why it's agitating to me is because Duolingo does have that. Duolingo has that. The owl has that. But you don't, Rosetta Stone? I was under the impression that Rosetta Stone was like the place to go if you're trying to learn a new language. You want to be fluent? You better shell out that Rosetta Stone money because they got you. And then when I had it for the 3 months, I was like, context clues? There's no like explanation behind what I'm doing. It's just do this activity and go. Not for $100 some. I won't. Comparing Duolingo to Rosetta Stone. Duolingo does have that if you go on your computer, which is important. I think if you're trying to really be fluent in a language and you have Duolingo, you should utilize it on your laptop. I don't think you're gonna get fluent or anywhere near fluent if you just use it on your phone. If you log on to Duolingo on your laptop, I think if you scroll down a bit, it has a section where it explains what's going on. Like it tells you this is what's going on, this is what you're doing right now. My con with Duolingo is that they teach you formal speech, which according to my teacher, she was saying that, in just day-to-day conversation with people, you won't really be using formal speech like that, like the samnida form. You wouldn't just use that in a day-to-day interaction. Yes, you use it frequently, but when you're just talking to somebody, you're more likely to use the polite form, which ends in yo. I wish that there was just a place that gave you a STEM word and then teaches you polite first and then formal. But Duolingo just gives you formal speech right away, and then Rosetta Stone gives you polite speech right away, which you'll be using a little bit more often than formal speech. If I had to choose one over the other, I don't know. I'm not going that deep. Everybody could get Duolingo. That's the thing. Everybody could get Duolingo because Duolingo is free for the most part, right? And if you got Rosetta Stone money, you can go ahead and do that and practice a little bit. I think there's like a free 3-day trial or something like that. If I find the link, I'll put it in the description box. And that is good for any language, not just Korean. So that's my review of Rosetta Stone and comparing it to Duolingo. Hopefully that gave you some insight. All right, y'all, so wait, let me get all my resources first. That, my note cards, my albums that I said to beware of. All right, y'all, I hope that I gave you some tips that you can utilize on your journey, whether it's using Korean or whatever language you want to learn. Make sure to subscribe and like this video if it was of any help. If you want to see more content from me. See you next time. Bye.